the Empire.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the season finale of Andor. I am continually amazed at how great this show is. Tony Gilroy has quietly put together one of the all-time best Star Wars experiences, and by far the best prequel story in Star Wars. Now, even though we know how this story ends, it's still captivating. So, let me know where you rank Andor within the Star Wars canon down in the comments below. But now, let's get to the breakdown. Last episode, I pointed out how the opening title adds more instruments in every episode. Now, this is done for a couple reasons. It's symbolic of how the rebellion is slowly coming together, but it's also showing Andor emerging from obscurity to become a hero of the rebellion. But every episode's instruments also reflect the story. For instance, the first 3 episodes included tribal drums to reflect Cassian's childhood. Now, this episode is very heavy with horns and drums. Drums obviously are used in a march to war. But here, the drums and horns have a literal meaning in the episode. They're from Marva's funeral procession. In fact, it's a clever reveal that the theme music has actually been this march music that's native to Ferrix all along. This is showing that rebellion is in Cassian's blood. It's part of who he is, but it's taken him 12 episodes for it to fully emerge. And it took the funeral to help him fully realize his potential as a rebel. And the funeral is scored by the same theme that guides him internally. The episode opens with Willman soldering his bomb together. Willman? Who's Willman? No, Willman. He's actually been in 4 episodes of this show, but just kind of in the background. He was working with Salman Pack in the first episode right here. Remember, Salman Pack is the guy who owned the secret radio that Bix used. The Empire tortured and killed him a few episodes ago. So now, Willman is looking at Salman's picture as motivation for him to create this bomb to get revenge on the Empire. Next, Dedra lands on Ferrix, exiting an Imperial shuttle with 2 Death Troopers. Now, of course, we first saw Death Troopers accompanying Orson Krennic in Rogue One, and later Grand Admiral Thrawn in Star Wars Rebels. Basically, they're elite stormtroopers who can actually fight, and they usually will accompany ISB agents or high-ranking officials. Easy way to remember this is the black armor pairs nicely with the white uniforms. Now, one thing I did not know until recently is that the Emperor named them Death Troopers because he wanted people to think that they were literal undead troopers. There were rumors in the early days of the Empire that they had created soldiers who could not die, and the Emperor wanted to feed into that fear.
Oh, that's a lot like that movie Return to Oz where Firuza Balk... Oh wait, hang on a second. I gotta take this. Oh, okay. But I don't own an automobile.
Doug, hang it up.
But my car warranty is about to expire, and I didn't even know I owned a car.
No, Doug, look, that's a robocall. It means that some online data broker sold your personal information to some company.
Oh, well that explains why I get calls like this all the time. Do you ever get calls like that?
Not anymore. I also used to get a ton of spam emails, but then I signed up for Incogni. They're the sponsor of this video. Have you guys ever noticed that sometimes you'll sign up for a store's loyalty card, and the next thing you know, you're suddenly getting random emails and calls, or you Google lawnmowers and suddenly you're getting spam emails about lawnmowers? Well, what happens is all these companies sell your data to giant firms called data brokers, and then they sell your information to other advertisers.
Oh, what a vicious cycle.
And you would be shocked how much of your personal information is just out there on the internet, like your address and phone number. Incogni found more than 190 brokers with my information. But here's the thing, those data brokers have to remove your name from their database if you ask them to.
Oh, but I don't have the time to contact all those companies and do all that stuff.
But that is where Incogni comes in. They contact those companies for you. You don't have to do anything, and they alert you when the request has been completed. After signing up, I get almost no spam, and I can't even remember the last time I got a phone call from my old friend, unknown number. So I highly recommend giving Incogni a try. The first 100 people to use my code ScreenCrush with the link in the description will get 20% off Incogni, so act fast. Now back to Andor, where 3 of the episode's key players converge on the first Ferrix scene. Now Zanwan is the comms guy who told Cassian about Marva, Brasso is his friend who was his alibi for the murder in the first episode, and the eventual traitor is named Nurchi. You'll remember, Cassian owed him money in the first episode.
He said all I needed to do was stand here.
All of their roles in the finale were foreshadowed in the very first episode, where we saw that Brasso was loyal, Zanwan helped Cassian cover his tracks, and Nurchi only cares about money. Ferrix is a bustle of activity, and this is where the production design of this show really shines. The Mandalorian, Obi-Wan, and the Book of Boba Fett were mostly filmed on the Volume, a dome of LCD screens that create digital environments, and the Volume is cool, but Andor is filmed on these wide, expansive sets. These sets allow the episode's directors to do more with extras, more activities, so everything feels real sort of random, like this is a world where people are just trying to get home from work or go to the pub. And this attention to detail really pays off when we know the significance of these bricks. The dead of Ferrix are the literal foundation of their society.
You become a block of Ferrix brick.
Now there's something charming about knowing that the same care that went into creating the sets is shared by the characters in the show when they built their world. Dedra is wearing the typical Star Wars disguise, just a hood.
It's not a disguise, Hank. We look like ourselves at a baseball game.
And all of this is intercut with Willman making a bomb, very neatly establishing all the moving parts that will come to a head in the climax. So Cinta has been spying on Corv for the past couple episodes. Corv is pretty obviously a spy, not even bothering to not talk to himself in public.
I want full coverage, spotters front and back.
Whereas he has conversations with Cinta and has no idea that she's a rebel.
Someone you know?
Just started last week.
And eventually, she'll do this to him. And he never sees it coming. And again, this was all set up in the first Ferrix arc of the show by Cassian.
They can't imagine it.
Can't imagine what?
That someone like me would ever get inside their house.
Then we cut from one spy to another. Mon Mothma's kind of emotional about her husband's gambling, so she lets her guard down in front of her driver. Now, she has known that this guy was a spy for the whole season, and he's always just kind of been there in the background. This is the first time we actually see the car from the driver's point of view, from the front, to really hit home that he is an Imperial agent.
I'm the spy.
Now, to symbolize that she's let her guard down, she begins the scene by unbuttoning her coat, literally opening herself up to an attack. So, Mon Mothma's upset about two things in her personal life. One, that she has to marry off her daughter to a gangster son. And to add to that, her own arranged marriage has saddled her with a dumbass degenerate gambler. And this explains why the gangster Davos knew him and Mon's cool reaction to their relationship.
I've met your husband several times.
I'm sure.
On the drive, Mon basically tells him not to poop where he eats, saying,
You go to Canto Bight.
which of course was the incredible space casino that we saw in The Last Jedi. And look, even if you don't like The Last Jedi, you have to love Canto Bight. Everything from the first cutaway.
It's a terrible place filled with the worst people in the galaxy.
To Carrie Fisher's dog Gary, to a drunken alien mocap by Mark Hamill feeding coins at a BB-8. Canto Bight has to be in everybody's top 1 Star Wars planet. Now, I've actually got a theory about this gambling storyline that I'm going to go over just a little later in the video. So Vel goes to see Cinta, where once again, Cinta is all business, choosing the cause over their relationship.
Good to see you too.
In last episode, I pointed out how Vel was filmed without lead room to show that there was something that she was missing, and she was being short-sighted. Now, the scene in this episode also has some interesting framing. Cinta looking through the spyglass, middle of the frame, with plenty of look room in front of her to show that she has her eye on the future. Cut to Vel, no look room, implying that she is not whole without Cinta's affection. She takes a step closer to Cinta, which only creates more space behind her, showing that she is truly alone. In the two-shot, Vel is out of focus, creating distance between her and Cinta, and then as Cinta turns, she and Vel are framed in separate shots, isolated within their each frame. There is no over-the-shoulder shot. Now, when you film someone over the shoulder, it implies a closeness or connection. But when you film someone isolated in a frame, it shows that they are alone and isolated from the rest of the world. So then we cut to Cassian, who, like Vel, is also seeking a connection with an immovable stone. He goes to the brick of his father, Clem. Now, as he's thinking about his father, we hear his dad's VO.
Here's the thing, Cassian. The man that sees everything is more blessed than cursed.
So this scene is Cassian remembering his dad's lesson that you need to take care of things. He says that these days people will just throw out old parts and get new ones. But with a little care, you can repair the broken gear and make it more valuable.
People don't look down the way they should.
You see, Book of Boba Fett, this is how you do a flashback. Cassian's flashback directly informs his decisions in this episode, and they also create a thematic parallel. Up until now, Cass has been trying to run away from his problems to get rich and leave, but in this episode, he chooses to honor the people of Ferrix, to repair what's broken, and to make it better. This also goes back to the theme music of the show, matching the music of the funeral march. Cassian's heart is finally aligned with his goals. There's also a more literal parallel here with Bix. She was broken by the Empire, and Cassian won't abandon her. When he learns that she is in prison in the very next scene, he remembers his father's words and decides to go on a rescue. So then the words of Nemik's journal begin to narrate the action. You'll remember Nemik passed on his journal to Cassian in episode 6. Cassian has been reading his journal, being inspired by his words. A lot of what Nemik says here boils down to nature versus the machine. He says,
"Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction."
Comparing the rebellion to, say, a weed growing through the crack of a sidewalk.
Life, finds a way.
And the key line of this series might just be,
The Imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural.
the Emperor, as a Sith, has constructed a hierarchy that draws its strength from the dark side.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
The Empire is built on fear and anger, just like the dark side of the Force. But the dark side of the Force is not natural. The dark side unbalances the Force because it can only destroy and never nurture life. The dark side harnesses the power of the Force, but only to benefit an individual and not to benefit the whole. And we see this reflected in this show on planets like Aldhani. The Empire is destroying local Aldhani customs to replace them with a system of order that they have devised, that they are forcing on the natural order of Aldhani. But the most beautiful natural event on Aldhani, the Eye, is more powerful than any Imperial fighter. And then this line,
oppression is the mask of fear,
goes back to what Cassian said to Kino Loy.
They just killed 100 men to keep them quiet. What would you call that? I'd call that power. Power doesn't panic.
People in power oppress others because they are afraid of being deposed, because deep down they know that their rule is unnatural and will be challenged. And Nemik ends his speech with one word.
remember this. Try.
So then we go from Nemik inspiring with hope to the Empire ruling with fear to the ISB. Mon Mothma's driver is reporting in, and we learn that indeed they are watching her bank accounts.
Where would I get the money? That's what scares me the most.
That's right. Word for word.
But it's weird that she's choosing now to slip up, right? Like, I think that she did this on purpose. If word got around that her husband was gambling, then this would explain the sizable hole in her account, a deficit that she knew the government was already going to discover. And then, to the public, it would look like that they marry off their daughter to Davos' family as a way to cover his gambling debts, and no one would suspect that Mon Mothma was secretly funding the rebellion all along.
Very clever.
High five. Then the Empire live watches the deaths of Anton Krieger and his forces. Now, the ISB didn't actually care about their forces or investigating everything further. They just wanted to close this case to impress people. Their goal was to make a bust that looked so good that they could impress the Emperor and tell everyone that they avenged the heist on Aldhani.
We put a lot of f***ing dope on the table.
Going back to the Empire being unnatural, Dedra speaks a lot about containment in the Imperials' work to create a box on Aldhani.
Your control positions here, here, and here. We'll have snipers in a containment unit there.
Containment, yes. Snipers, no.
Whereas Ferrix is about to show that growth is spontaneous and cannot be contained by a box. Then Cass meets with Brasso, and by the way, this grate is just like one of the ones that we saw here in Jabba's palace. He delivers Marva's message.
It was already burning. He's just the first spark of the fire.
Again, fire and light are often used as metaphors for the good side of the Force.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
And this line is a killer.
Tell him I love him more than anything he could ever do wrong.
And it pairs beautifully with their last conversation, when he said that he would always be worried about her if she stayed behind, and she said,
"That's just love."
And of course, just as Qyburn says,
find access.
We cut to Axis. Now this time, Luthen is not using any public transport to get into the city. He's using a private bike to stay completely undetected. But Cyril and Linus Mosk are taking the pro-public transport that we saw way back in Episode 3. Cyril's storyline may seem superfluous in this episode, but it elegantly expresses the theme of rebellion sprouting up spontaneously. Dedra tries to contain Ferrix in a box, and she also pins down all of her emotions in a box. Cyril loves Dedra, but she refuses to open herself up to him emotionally.
I want what you want.
You're out of your mind.
But in this episode, during the riot, she is stripped of all her power. She is reduced to living, burning fear. Cyril rescues her in this vulnerable state, and she looks at him and sees the face of love, and sure enough, gives a brilliant performance here as she silently works through these emotions. Now, just as rebellion occurs spontaneously, springing forth from a box of control, her emotions pour out of her, and she can't control her feelings of fear, relief, and affection. For instance, the Empire is trying to limit and control the time and place of the funeral, which is a natural event for the people of Ferrix. So their local customs, like the guy hitting the anvil with great precision and care, immediately disrupts the Imperial plans. And then the instruments tune, like the show is warming up for its final act. As they march, instruments are slowly added in, like the opening theme that we've been watching for the entire season. The early funeral forces them to empty the troops out of the hotel, allowing Cassian to rescue Bix. Cyril can't get to the street because the Imperials are blocking him, just as the ISB blocked him from investigating Andor on the streets of Ferrix. B2 has quickly become my favorite droid because he is so earnest and vulnerable. Unlike, say, R2-D2 or 3PO, he doesn't have a key place in the galactic conflict. He doesn't carry plans to a battle station. He wasn't built by Darth Vader. He's just a sad little guy who loves his family.
I don't want to be alone. I want Mama Marva.
After the first bit of music, there's this stillness. followed by a faster march like the people of Ferrix know they're marching off to war. And then B2 projects Marva, much like R2 projected different images of the rebellion, Luke and Leia.
The message, R2, the message.
Greetings, Exalted One.
Marva's self-eulogy says,
I always wanted to be lifted. The dead lifted me with their truth.
Now she's saying that she wanted her life to have some meaning by inspiring other people to believe in something greater than themselves. When she was a kid, this was more religious, but now it's literal and referring to the rebellion. And as she says,
and I yearn to lift you.
We cut to Cassian, who is getting to Bix by climbing. Climbing is a recurring theme for Cassian.
They're leaving.
Marva goes on to say that Ferrix was sleeping while there was a wound at the center of the galaxy spreading like rust. Now, of course, Coruscant is at the center of the galaxy, and the dark side of the Force, the Emperor, is spreading his decay outwards. And when she says to fight the Empire, the cloak covers her face in half darkness. And this metaphorically is perfect. The Empire tried to black out her message, but the light still shines through. And then a riot starts. But it's interesting, this doesn't feel like a military riot or a protest riot or a coordinated rebel attack. This to me felt more like the hundreds of strikes by union workers over the years when they would face off against police. Like in 1937 when Chicago police fired on a crowd of 1,000 steelworkers. Actually, you know what? Just Google it. You won't believe how many times this has happened in our history. So the Imperial SWAT teams almost have this under control before Willman sets off his bomb and obscures everything with smoke and darkness. Now earlier I mentioned how tough the Death Troopers were, but Cassian kills one with a single shot while in the middle of a dive. Awesome. All through this, the anvil is still being rung, used as a tempo to guide everyone, like a war drum. Or like the banging of pots and pans in Episode 3. Cassian rescues Bix, and it's not even treated like a grand, heroic moment like in A New Hope.
I'm Luke Skywalker, I'm here to rescue you.
Bix is shattered by the Empire, and there's not much left to save, which ties in beautifully with the flashback of Clem giving Andor advice. But Cassian gets her, Willman, and Brasso to a ship. And by the way, he does this with the help of the same guy who said that he would stop helping Cassian off-world at the end of Episode 1.
Why did he change his mind?
Well, this is the realization of what Luthen wanted.
We need the Empire to help. We need them angry. We need them coming down hard. Oppression breeds rebellion.
And now we're seeing that come to fruition. The Empire leaves people no choice but to rebel against them. And Cassian gives them a familiar escape plan.
The moment you get over the water, you climb.
You know, like all of this.
Climb! Come on! Climb!
B2 is so happy to see Cassian.
I never got to see you.
But then he has to say goodbye. But Cass gives him a big boy job to do.
Take care of Bix until I get there. I'm counting on you.
You always say that.
B2 Emo is voiced by Dave Chapman, who is also the puppeteer for BB-8 in The Force Awakens. And then they escape on a ship with engines just like a Y-Wings. Then we cut to Mon Mothma executing her own escape plan, marrying off her kid to a gangster son. Notice, Leia has tightly braided hair, which symbolizes that she is celebrating the old traditional customs of her world.
Safe in the braid of the old ways.
Exactly. Luthen rides off to a secret lair, a lot like Dooku at the end of Attack of the Clones. And of course, Dooku's escape ended with him meeting with Darth Sidious. And this escape ends with Luthen meeting with Andor. Much like Dooku, Andor offers his new mentor his life.
Kill me, or take me in.
It took 12 episodes, but this is the most richly nuanced Star Wars origin story ever told. And then we get to that killer post-credits scene. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll wait. Pause now, please. Alright, welcome back. The post-credit scene begins with droid soldering, a perfect mirror to the episode's opening of Willman soldering his weapon. But then we see that the droids are also soldering a weapon. Like predicted, it's the Death Star. But this isn't just an Easter egg, it is loaded with subtext and meaning. For one thing, we know that the prison complex on Nardina was dedicated to just making these tiny parts that are a small part of the Death Star. The Death Star is the ultimate instrument of fear.
Fear will keep the local systems in line. Fear of this battle station.
And fear, as we talked about earlier, is of the dark side and unnatural. And the Death Star is a small, man-made moon, the definition of something unnatural trying to supplant a natural celestial body. This also fits in perfectly within the canon. Books like Thrawn Treason and the movie Rogue One talk extensively about how far behind the Death Star's construction was running. And now we see part of the reason for those delays were prison rebellions like the one that happened on Narkina 5 that created a limited supply of parts. And the Death Star was also a terrible idea militarily. The Empire diverted funds away from Thrawn's TIE Defender projects, and those little ships probably would have won the war for the Empire.
Orson Krennic has been quite persuasive about diverting the funding to his own project.
Stardust.
So you see, the Emperor wanted to rule by fear, through the Death Star, and because fear is an unnatural way to rule, it meant that the dark side was doomed to fail. This is also a sick irony that Cassian helped construct the instrument that will kill him 5 years later. But his final sacrifice would enable the new generation to destroy the Death Star once and for all. This was perfect.
Oh wait, hang on, I gotta take this. Okay. Yep, I'll take care of that.
Aw, Doug, was that another robocall?
No, I don't get robocalls since I started using Incogni.
Also, who was that?
That was your mom.
Good one. And just a reminder, if you want to get your data removed from the internet, Incogni is the way to go. So I want to know what you guys think of all this. Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe or smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.